Hi, welcome to The Doctor Is In. My name is Shasta Garcia. I'll be your host. Mike is not here. I am here. And the doctor's here too. We got Dr. Randall Smart with us, and we are going to be talking about earwax. Yes, we're going to be talking about earwax for a whole 30 minutes, so you better stick around because we got a lot to say, and you'd be surprised. There's a lot of good information, so just sit back and just fill your brain with knowledge, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Shasta, for having me on the show. It's great to be here.
Well, I'm glad that you're here too because, man, can't wait to hear about all the earwax.
Earwax, right? Mm-hmm. So we have these big radars on the side of our heads, right, called ears.
That we put earrings on.
Right, and we decorate them, correct, and it has these little canals that go in, and it's what we hear with, but they can create problems, like sort of a nose or anything that's on us, a hand, a foot.
They can all create problems.
These big radars can create problems, and one of the most common problems we see has to do with the wax that is produced in the ear. So what we know is the way an ear normally functions is it produces something called cerumen. You don't have to remember that.
Cerumen.
And cerumen, kind of coupled with some old cells and a little bit of glandular material, forms this material called earwax. And probably 40-50% of us have earwax. It's genetic. Some have it, some don't. If your parents had it, you're probably going to have it.
Wait, so there's some people who don't have any earwax at all?
They don't have earwax.
Wow.
Right.
Okay.
I'm not one of them. I've got earwax. And so we produce earwax. And there are actually two different kinds of earwax. There is dry earwax.
Or wet earwax, right?
Perfect.
I mean, what?
That's exactly right.
I'm
That's
so
right.
smart.
And wet. And so most people with European ancestry have wet earwax. And most people with more of Asian ancestry have dry earwax.
Is it more common to have earwax than it is to not have earwax?
It's just about equal. It's about 50%. So that earwax has a normal function. Most of the stuff on your body does something, right? Mm-hmm. And so earwax has a normal function, and what it does is it protects the ear from infection and trauma, like injury, because the skin on the inner ear is very thin, and it's right against the bone, and it's very vulnerable. So it protects the ear from those things, and we think it has a useful purpose. And normally, earwax has a natural flow that most people don't know about, and it naturally moves from the very inside of the ear to the outside of the ear, and then either kind of falls off or...
Well, the people who don't have earwax because of their genetics, are they more prone to getting ear infections and
maybe
not having
I don't know for sure, but maybe that's possible. Ear infections are very common, and they're much more common in our younger population and the children. But part of that has to do with the fact that our anatomy has a lot of variation. So like most people, their ears are a little bit different. Some have lobes, some don't have lobes, some have big ears, some have little ears. And so the ear canals have a similar kind of variation. Some are skinny, some are fat, some are long, some are short. And all the stuff on the inside is about the same, but the actual canals and the ears are a little bit different.
Do you ever get grossed out by earwax when you're looking at people's ear?
Honest answer, a couple times.
Okay.
Yeah,
I was just wondering. I mean, I've never looked in somebody's ear with your tools.
Yeah, sometimes. Some of the hardest cases are in the seniors in our older population. And they can we've seen some of these patients where we've pulled out earwax plugs as big as my thumb.
Wow.
After working on it for like an hour or two.
Can't even believe that much can actually fit.
Yes, right? Yeah.
It's crazy.
Right.
So it must be a pretty long canal.
Right, and it's been there a really long time. And when you get it out, you kind of poke at it and kind of look at it. And But, here's the problem. For the 50% of us that have earwax, do you have earwax?
I mean, yes.
For the 50% of us that have earwax, it really just doesn't bother us. It's a really small percentage of the population that it really bothers. And what we call that is impaction. And impaction means that wax gets kind of
So
in
do
there.
you suggest that people use, Q-tips and get the wax out if they have wax?
I do not suggest that, and we're going to talk about that. I think there's a lot of really bad ideas that people shouldn't do, and that's
Yeah.
part of the problem.
I've seen a lot of people do that.
Yes, they do, right?
Like how far do you stick it in there? Should you stick it in there? I'm like,
Yeah, what I wonder about, the American society is kind of a very, very clean society. We're kind of clean freaks. Sometimes I wonder if we just don't go too far with that. Like shampooing every single day. And it's a personal choice, but, a lot of times I feel like we're washing off some really useful oils from our skin and maybe cleaning our ears too much. And I think sometimes the cleaning is a bigger problem than...
because earwax can be protective and it can be useful.
It can be very helpful, right? Very helpful. And
But what are the consequences of having too much earwax?
so what happens is as we age, that earwax becomes harder and thicker and less fluidy. And so this tends to be a problem in older people. And because as they get older, this stuff just gets packed into their ears. And I'll answer your question, but I really want to make an important point here. And what happens is so many of these older people are labeled with can't hear, maybe demented, depressed, right? Because he's not talking and he's not interacting. And
It's very frequent.
it's
yeah,
very common,
yeah.
right? And so many of them, that's true. They are depressed or they are demented, but not all of them. And some of them have this just earwax just packed in the back of their ears, and they can't hear
And they wouldn't
anything you
know,
say.
right? I mean, there's
right.
no signs other than not being able to hear.
Right, and nobody would normally know that. I mean, you don't go around looking in people's ears, right? Nobody does that,
That'd be
so
a
you
little
wouldn't know. But it's very interesting if they've done experiments where if you take that wax, if you find some of these older types, and you take that wax out, their hearing improves by like 10 decibels. They become much more interactive. They become much less demented. And so it has a really...
Yeah, they can hear again.
And it's an kind of easy thing to do. So there's all this opportunity out there. I'm a big fan of older people.
How do you get the wax out? When you're at the doctor's office and they have that much wax in their ear.
So how do I get it out?
Well, yeah, you said you've had some do you do that?
Yes, I do
Oh,
that.
okay. So
Yes, I do
how
that.
do you go about doing that? Is there something you put in their ear?
So there are different ways of removing earwax, and the best way is the natural way. What your ear and my ear is doing right now, and that's just the natural flow of earwax out. Okay, that's the best way. So most people don't need to clean their ears or do anything with theirs. They just need to leave them alone. The second best way is what we call mucolytics, which is solution you put in your ears.
Oh.
And you can buy these solutions over the counter. You don't need a prescription or anything. And the idea is you put drops in your ear and you leave it in there, I don't know, 5-10 minutes, maybe a little bit longer. And then you just gently let the drops come out and maybe even irrigate that. And people, when we recommend people do that, we recommend they do it about 2 to 3 times a day, and they do it for about 4 to 5 days. And generally, that solves the problem. But if it doesn't,
Is that supposed to dissolve the earwax, or what is it?
Yes, it makes it fluid, kind of dissolves it.
Interesting.
And so there are 2 products out. One is called Debrox, and the other is called Cerumenex. Remember Cerumenex? And the Debrox is, I think, the better of the 2. So if somebody comes into my office and they say, look, my ears are plugged up, something's wrong, and I look in and I see a big lump of wax, I say, okay, go buy some Debrox, use it for 3 to 4 days, come back, and then I'll irrigate your ears. And what we do in the office is we take a bulb syringe and we just carefully put some water in there and kind of carefully irrigate it, and most of the wax comes right out.
And I've heard of people putting candle wax in their ear. What do you think about that?
Well, I think there are two really bad ideas. One is you were asking me, I think, about Q-tips or cotton tips.
Just
So,
'cause I've
so
seen it
cotton
so much,
tips is just like packing the cannon, man. Just like, it's like loading the musket, and you're just packing it in. So,
Have people like injured their ear by using Q-tips?
yeah,
You've seen it?
perforate your eardrum, lose your hearing. So the idea of using cotton tips, if you want to use it on the auricle of the ear, the outer part of the ear, not a problem. But do not put it in the ear canals. Just don't do it. But let's talk about candling.
Yeah, I've never done it, but I've heard people doing it.
I think this is a really bad and a really dangerous idea. And what you do is you take a hollow candle.
Don't try this at home.
Don't try this at home. You should look at it on YouTube. It's on YouTube. Okay. But it's a hollow candle. It's about 8 or 10 inches long.
Okay.
And you put one end in your ear, and then you light the other end, and the flame and the heat sort of is supposed to melt the wax and pull it out or something like that. And it's dangerous. It's not endorsed by anybody in the medical field, like the ear specialists or the internists or pediatricians. Nobody thinks this is a good idea, and I don't even know how popular it is.
I wonder whose genius idea that was.
I don't know, man. Somebody who sells candles. I don't know, but it seems like a really bad idea.
We got a new purpose for candles. You can get the earwax out of your ear.
Hollow candles. I mean,
know.
YouTube it, and you'll be amazed.
I don't know, guys. If you want some entertainment, start YouTubing how to get earwax out of your ears. Just take Dr. Smart. Just don't do it.
You don't have to look very hard. Really bad idea. But there are other things that complicate the problem of earwax. And for example, a lot of our millennial patients have earbuds, right? You probably have earbuds. Everybody has earbuds. I don't. Unless
I don't really have that much time for earbuds. I might mainly listen to music just like out loud.
Okay, so earbuds can complicate the problem, right? If you're using earbuds, that can kind of push the material back into your ear. But one of the bigger problems is the hearing aids. And there's a lot of older and middle-aged people with hearing aids, right? You see them all the time, right? And those can be a problem because those can prevent the ear from draining correctly and the stuff coming out. And I'll tell you a very interesting fact. So there is a thing called hearing aid failure. Pretty intuitive, right? It means your hearing aids aren't working, right?
Yeah.
60%, roughly 60% of hearing aid failure is related to wax. So
60%, wow.
So you spend $4,000 on a pair of hearing aids, and then they don't work, and then you might spend some more, and then you might go back and forth or whatever, and all you need to do is get the wax out of your ears, and the hearing aids work fine.
Before getting hearing aids, does anybody look in their ear?
Well, hopefully. We do in my office, and most of the docs know to do that. But, if it's at home, somebody may not know to do that. And if somebody's out there selling lots of hearing aids, they may not necessarily recommend that. But a big percentage of hearing aid failures are related to the wax in their ears. Now you were asking me, what do we do in the office? So we irrigate, after they've used the mucolytics, we irrigate their ears and usually get quite a bit out, and then we look and verify that it's all out. But there are cases that actually we have to refer to ear specialists, that we just can't get it out, and it's a problem. And if you do it wrong, it can be potentially dangerous. I mean, you can perforate the eardrum. The eardrum is very thin. The eardrum is the part in the middle ear that moves back and forth and makes you hear and, is related to sound, right? Mm-hmm. And that eardrum is so thin, you can see right through it. Like when I look in somebody's ears, I can see through the eardrum into the inner part of the ear. I mean, that's how thin it is. So So you can see if you're poking around in your ear or somebody may not know what they're doing, it's pretty easy to rupture an eardrum. And once you've ruptured an eardrum, you got a bigger problem. Right. Which reminds me, I am. One of the issues is there anybody who shouldn't use the mucolytics, like the Debrox and the Cerimenex? And sometimes that's not a good idea. Like, if there's any thing that would suggest infection, and usually that's drainage, like stuff draining out of your ear. Sometimes that can be ear pain. But if there are any signs of infection or concern, you may want to go see the doctor before you put the drops in, because the drops can potentially cause a bigger problem if there's a ruptured membrane or another problem. So you have to be a little bit careful with that.
Okay. Well, now we know what to do and what not to do.
Right.
What are the consequences of not paying attention to the earwax? And we've discussed hearing loss. Is there anything else that people may be having symptoms of but may not necessarily associate it with earwax?
Yes. So one of the most common symptoms we see is something called tinnitus. Have you heard of tinnitus?
No.
Oh, right.
No.
Okay. So tinnitus is ringing in the ears. And a lot of people have ringing in the ears. And it can be one ear, it can be both ears. But tinnitus is very common. And frankly, a lot of tinnitus is related to nerve damage. Like if you work in high noise environments, like factory environments, or my background.
Damage your ear, your ears.
Right, you do, or like chainsaws. I mean, we're out in the country. People use chainsaws, and they use those blower things, and a lot of.
Is there any way to come back from that, or?
Well, not if there's nerve damage. You can prevent it from getting worse, but it's hard to recover from. And I know a lot about hearing loss because I was in the Air Force for 24 years, and we have runways and flight lines and airplanes, and like virtually everybody that ever retired from the Air Force had hearing loss. But the tinnitus, more often than not, it's from nerve damage, that ringing in the ears. But there are a number of other things that can cause it, but one of them can simply be the wax. And so you were asking about other symptoms. If somebody has ringing in their ears or swooshing in their ears, sometimes taking that wax out can really help them. And then another one that is very common is dizziness. And so there's a lot of dizzy people out there, right? I see them. I know. I mean, trust me, there's a lot of dizzy people. So dizziness has to do with equilibrium, right? And equilibrium is tricky stuff. Part of it is your brain, part of it is the inner ear, but part of it is stuff, joints and nerves, and part of it's vision. But if that dizziness is related to the inner ear, sometimes that can be provoked by wax. And the ears get blocked and they don't pop, and you don't have equal pressure on both sides, and that wax can make you off balance and dizzy.
Crazy.
I know, right? Right. And you wouldn't necessarily know. You would think, well, maybe I'm getting older, or maybe, I've got some other problem, but you wouldn't think.
Earwax.
It could be earwax. Right. Exactly.
What are people's expressions when you say, well, all of this is from earwax?
They're happy. Yeah, they're happy because what they want is they want you to figure out what's wrong, and they want it to be an easy answer. Like, the worst thing you can do is figure out something, or the worst thing you can do is just not know and say, I don't know what's wrong with you. But closer to worse is, like, let's say you needed an operation, or, you needed to be in the hospital or something like that. So when I look in somebody's ears, and I look in lots of ears, and I say, I think it's an earwax problem, the first thing they say is, what? And the second thing they say is, great, can you do something about it?
And it's a part of the routine, like a doctor's visit for the nurses to check the ears, right? Isn't that part of?
Usually not the nurses. Okay. So the nurses usually get the patient in the room and check the blood pressure, and
then the doctor's a while.
and the doctor then comes in. And it depends, if you came in just for a blood pressure problem, I might not look in your ears.
Oh, okay.
If you came in for a checkup, I would definitely look in your ears. If you came in for hearing loss, I would absolutely look in your ears. So it kind of depends on the clinical context.
Do you have any suggestions for people who don't want to get to that point where their ears do that? I mean, is there a good time to start worrying about the earwax in your ears, or how do you know? I mean, because you don't want people sticking Q-tips in the ear, so.
Right. So how could you prevent this? Really is what we're talking about. And you can't prevent your ears from producing wax. I mean, there is no way to stop that. There's nothing you can put in your ear to make it not produce wax. Plus, you don't want to put anything in your ear anyway. But what you could do, and what some specialists recommend, is you could take a cotton ball and you could kind of soak it in mineral oil.
Essential oils? Or essential
Mineral
oils?
oil.
Is it different?
I think mineral oil is different.
I haven't heard of mineral oil. Okay.
Mineral oil?
Okay.
You could soak it in mineral oil. I mean, not soak it, but,
Yeah.
get a bunch of
I've
it.
heard of people doing it with essential oils. That's why I wasn't.
That might work,
I've heard of mineral
I
oil.
wouldn't be opposed to that. If I had a patient that said, I want to use central oils, I'd say, sure, fine.
Yeah.
But you can take that cotton ball and get it in the oil, and then you can put it in your ear, and you could leave it in there, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes. And you could do it for both ears, because not just one produces wax, they both produce wax. And you could do that, I don't know, every couple weeks, once a month. And that'll help the flow and the lubrication of the material in there. I've never done that, and I have earwax. I'm too busy to do that. but for some people, it's a really big problem. And if my earwax, I think, comes out normally. At least I hope it does, as far as I can tell. But if you had these impactions, these cerumen impactions, and you really had problems, where you're always in the doctor's office, and it's kind of uncomfortable. I mean, I would be willing to do the oils with the cotton ball. I would do that, absolutely.
Yeah, my sister's had ear problems her whole life, and
Oh, really?
yeah, she's little, but she would get ear infections all the time. So she had some sort of surgery on her ear when she was younger. She still gets ear infections all the time, and it got to the point where she's having so much antibiotics. We've been using lavender, Melaleuca, and lemon, I think, in a little roller bottle. And whenever she gets an earache, we just roll it around. She's been to the doctor for a year and years, which has been kind of interesting.
Oh,
the
that's
whole oil
great.
thing, you never know if it's going to work, but I mean, it's always
That's
the
great.
mineral oil's worth a shot too, so you just never know.
How old is she?
She just turned 10.
Yeah, so usually those repetitive ear infections are in those younger people.
But the earwax shouldn't be a problem for little ones, right? Or is it?
I'm not a pediatrician, so the youngest patients I see are about 14 years old. But my understanding is there are some younger patients that can have earwax problems. But if they're being managed for these ear infections, then somebody is looking in their ears. I mean, right? That's why they're in the office. And they would probably be aware of that. I don't know how common that is. I know it can happen.
Because we've talked about it being very common in elders, especially in, with all the problems that come with it, like the hearing loss and things, the connection with it.
Right. I think in the younger population, the issue of infection has more to do with the anatomy of the ear and not being able to. You have little teeny tubes that go from your ears down to your throat. They're called eustachian tubes. And I think the younger patients have eustachian tube problems, and their eardrums don't move right. And I think that's what predisposes them to the infections. Now, in the older group, it's really not the anatomy, it's the fact that their earwax just becomes this really crusty, hard, stuff that doesn't come out very easy.
Yeah. Well, we only have like 5 minutes left. So is there anything about earwax that we may haven't talked about yet that you think the viewers should know about?
We talked about the candling. We talked about the treatment. We talked about the anatomy of the ear. I would say everybody at some point in their life ought to have somebody look in their ears. And everybody should probably get a checkup from time to time. Certainly anybody over, about 25, 30 years old should be evaluated and checked up. And, just to make sure their blood pressure's okay and their cholesterol's okay. And they don't have diabetes. But during that checkup, if it's not offered to them, they should say, look, could you check my ears? Could you take a look? Having somebody look at home is not a good idea.
Can you even look? You can't even see in it, right? I mean, it's kind of dark in there.
You could try. You could have some device at home where you think you could look.
I wonder if they have the apps for that.
They might. But actually, the ear canal is not straight in. It is a little bit up and a little bit forward. So the ear canal, when you look in somebody's ear, is not straight in. It's up and forward. And if you wanted to look in somebody's ear, you have to actually lift that ear up, and you have to lift it forward. In fact, when we do the irrigations in the office,
with the whole thingy.
we actually lift their ear up and pull it forward a little bit before we irrigate.
Okay, and you have them laying down when they do it?
Yes, absolutely. One of the things I should tell you and the audience about irrigating an ear, you can do that at home. It's a little bulb syringe. You can buy them at the pharmacy, drugstore. But what's really important is the water when you do the irrigation has to be lukewarm. It kind of tepid, right? Tepid. Because if it's either cold or hot, it stimulates certain nerves in your ear that will cause vertigo.
Oh, that's not good.
No, that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
And vertigo is when everything is spinning and you can't figure out anything. So if you wanted to torture somebody, which is a bad idea, you could irrigate their ear with cold water or hot water, and they get some of the worst vertigo they'd have ever had in their life.
So don't do that.
That's a bad idea, right?
Yes. And Dr. Smart, it's been so great talking with you. We actually have not even a minute left.
Oh my gosh.
So, yes, thank you for entertaining me about earwax for the last 30 minutes. And I hope you guys learned a lot of information, and don't try any of the things that we told you not to try, because you can end up So yeah, don't do that. Thank you for joining us on The Doctor Is In, and have a good day.